Welcome to the Kingsburg Community Church podcast, Thinking About Faith. We pray that this podcast helps you deepen your faith in God and stir some inner thoughts about the Christian life.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the KCC podcast, Thinking About Faith. This is our 61st episode. And as I said last week, this is kind of a potpourri after our series on church history. And today I'm addressing a topic that kind of comes out of my own experience. And I'm sure your experience as a Christian, if you walked with Jesus for any length of time, you're going to know that Jesus is perfect, but that other Christians are not. And neither are you. And because of that, it won't be long in your Christian life, particularly if you're involved in a church, where someone disappoints you or where you have to deal with the fact that you disappointed someone. Those of us who are pastors, there are a lot of different gifts that come into being an effective pastor. But one thing that all pastors have at least a bit of is a desire to please people. We want people to like us. We want people to be happy with us. We want to help people and we want to encourage people. And so because of that, there's a weight that comes when people are let down because of something that you did or mistake you made, or maybe a decision that you made. And, sometimes you have to make those decisions that are 60-40. And in choosing the 60, you disappointed 40% of the people. And that's just kind of part of the real estate. By the time I was ready to retire, I was tired of having to disappoint 40% of the people. That just weighed on me. And it's one of the reasons I pray almost daily for Pastor Ricky, because you can just get weary of that. He doesn't show any signs of having that burden. So keep praying for him because it is a burden. We are less than perfect people, and we are given less than perfect decisions. And so because of that, disappointment is a part of the Christian life, and when people disappoint you as well. So I want to give you some tips with dealing with when somebody lets you down, and also when you let other people down. The first thing I think we have to do is to do some internal work. And I would say the first question is just to do a little bit of inventory. Are you a person who finds it easy to forgive? Hopefully you are. And if you aren't, as you walk with Jesus, hopefully you become more of a forgiving person. I have a lot of faults, but one of the things that has always come easier to me than a lot of people is the ability to forgive people who have disappointed me or have wronged me. And that's been a tremendous blessing that God has given. And ask God for that. If you are a person who has difficulty forgiving people, do a self-inventory. Are there people who have hurt you more than a year ago that you're still angry at? If there's more than one or two, maybe that's a good indication you should talk to a Christian therapist and work on that, because when we don't forgive, often it can lead to bitterness, mistrust of other people. It steals our joy. And I think most people that we haven't forgiven are not in a position to harm us anymore. Now, I'm not saying forgiving is not the same as forgetting. You don't want to allow yourself to be a victim of a person who is untrustworthy again. But to forgive them is to disavow any sort of revenge, to get over those feelings of pain that recur when you think about that thing that happened, to get to a point where the scar tissue has formed, it's no longer sensitive, and where you can actually pray for their good. That's Ephesians 4. verse 31 and 32 says, "Put away bitterness. Be kind and forgiving." That's the goal for every single one of us. And I know that there are some who are listening who will say, "Well, Pastor Ed, you don't know what she did to me. You don't know what he did to me." That's true. I don't know. But I've heard stories of Corrie ten Boom, who was imprisoned she and her family, for sheltering Jews during World War II. And she saw a former Nazi prison guard that she knew in the prison at one of her talks, and all the feelings came back, and he came up to her and thanked her for her talk because he had become a Christian and God had changed his heart. And she talked about the struggle to forgive, but she finally got there through the grace of God. If someone can forgive their Nazi prison guard, I'm sure you can forgive that person who hurt you. That's not the same as trusting them again. That's not to say that there isn't justice to be served, but at the same time, to be kind and forgiving, to wish them to know Jesus and his forgiveness and his new life in their life. Psalm 139 is a great touchstone. I used to know the entire chapter, but at the end it says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. See if there be any harmful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way." And that's a prayer that we should pray regularly. Show me the harmful ways in me. I grew up in a household where words were often used to hurt and where debate was encouraged. Part of becoming an educated person was learning to argue and to use logic and reason. And because of that, I grew into an argumentative person. And I didn't even realize that till I got married, and I would hurt somebody arguing them. And then I would ask my wife, did I come on too strong? And invariably, she's very kind, so she wouldn't say yes, but she'd say, well, I think you could have been, I think she was hurt when you said this, or, whatever. And I realized I can be really offensive when I'm engaged and see the issue and want to be right more than wanting to care for the heart of the person I disagree with. So when we're disappointed, we need to check our heart. How am I with this? Did I offend that person? Did I disappoint that person? Is there something, as well as, is this a minor annoyance that I really need to let go? 90% of the frustrations, maybe even 99% of the frustrations that you will have with other people in the Christian church, you will come to the conclusion, I just need to let that go. That it's, individuals have foibles and their ways of doing things. And, maybe I care about that more than I should. Or, if they get their way and I don't get my way, is anybody going to die over this? Is anybody going to lose their faith? Is the church going to be ineffective? So, you can just let some things go and think about other things and get over your disappointment. And that'll actually be good exercise for becoming a more forgiving, tolerant, and flexible sort of person. Now, that's not to trivialize when somebody really hurts you, or particularly when somebody meant to hurt you and they were effective at doing that. That's a different sort of thing. And toxic people, dealing with toxic people, that's probably another podcast. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about just the situation where, one person wants to use the storage space to store some things, and the other person wants to clean it out and have nothing on the shelves. And so because of that, they threw away something that you were going to use and you weren't asked, and it's frustrating. That person was not trying to attack you, but that person was a little thoughtless. And when we're sharing space, sometimes we're going to get on each other's nerves. In those situations where you come to the conclusion that, no, I shouldn't let this go because either I really have been hurt by this, or I really think the person was in the wrong, or, gosh, I'm afraid this person is going to hurt someone else in the same way. If this person, there's a trail of bodies behind this person, and I need to bring some correction to this situation. Matthew 18 is always the outline for dealing with Christian conflict. Now, I should say it's the outline, it's guidelines. I don't personally take it as law, because there are sometimes, it starts out by saying, if your brother sins against you, go to him and tell him his fault between you and him alone, and then you can be reconciled. That is not an effective thing. It's not a wise thing with a toxic personality, because that person will try to gaslight you, will end up injuring you again. That's not a trustworthy person. But for the average person who didn't mean to hurt you, if you can go to them and say, I know you love cleaned out closets and it looks so neat and orderly, and there are so many things around here that don't have a reason and really, can be downsized. But, when you threw away the stuff that was on that one shelf, I probably should have labeled it better, but I use that, twice a year when I do this, and now I have to go and get a new one. And, maybe in the future, if you're going to get rid of something, you can put a sign on it for a month or so. This is going, tell me if you don't want it to go. And I know that that's frustrating because it takes time, but then somebody can, say, please don't throw that out. In dealing one-on-one with someone, if you have a disagreement, it's always hard, but it cuts off the temptation, which is for me to go to a third person and gossip about that person. And nothing breeds disunity within a family or a church more than gossip. It's so much harder to go confront a person individually, but it's so much healthier to do that. And when a person comes to you and you feel like there's no reason why they came to you, you can gently redirect them by saying, that sounds like something you need to go to, that first person and talk to them about it. I'll pray for you as you go to talk to them about it. So you don't get drawn into the gossip. You redirect that person to do the Matthew 8:15 first step of going to that person. Going to a person, of course, is only going to work if you act in humility and you keep the main thing the main thing. You can't go with a scolding, confronting attitude. Nobody likes being scolded. Nobody likes being corrected. So if you're going to go, you have to go with the spirit of humility and do it in a way that allows that person to apologize or to correct and say, I won't do that again. the goal within the Christian body is always restoration, not to be right. Now, there are a couple of situations where restoration is not possible. And again, that's when you have toxic individual or when the other person just doesn't want to be reconciled. And, that you can't force someone to want to be reconciled. It could be that you're ready for reconciliation after a week, and it's going to take them a month, or maybe not even forever. Ephesians 4:15 says, speak the truth in love. So that means we have to be honest about those things that have hurt us or have disappointed us. And we should be gracious if someone comes to us whom we've disappointed and they are honest with us. Sometimes we take it as an accusation, even when it's not. I remember several times being corrected after a sermon in the front of the church, kind of in front of everybody, by someone who had their emotions involved. And it was always a chore to take a deep breath and not respond to their emotion. But usually they were correct in something of what they were saying. And I needed to amend what I said, apologize, and ask forgiveness. And that never feels very good. And usually I would follow that up a week or so later and say, I want to thank you for coming up. That took a lot of guts, coming to the pastor with something that, you're disappointed with. I wonder if that happens again, if you can do that privately and not right after the sermon in front of everybody. That makes it a lot more difficult for me to respond. And in every instance, except one, the person said, yeah, I should have waited. I was emotionally involved and I wanted to correct you right then and there. And I should have thought about your feelings and not done it in such a public way. Again, with Christian brothers and sisters, our goal is to be reconciled. And, the Bible says, as much as it depends upon you, live at peace with every other person. And that's not always possible, but as far as it depends on you, don't be the one who refuses to live at unity if you can help it. Forgiveness is central to Christian faith, isn't it? I mean, we don't really have a relationship with Jesus Christ and with God unless Jesus dies on the cross to win our forgiveness for our sins. Because of that, God imputes Jesus' righteousness to our righteousness, to our unrighteousness, because we're not righteous. And with that, there is justice is satisfied and God's wrath is satisfied. And so because of that, we don't suffer those things. At the same time, we accept his forgiveness. We can't be in denial and pretend that nothing happened. And particularly if it's habitual sin, we have to make sure that we're changing our behaviors in ways that we won't be tempted in that same way again, because we can't allow ourselves to get into a sin pattern that's repeated. And again, churches can be at their worst places where we make excuses for people who just leave a trail of bodies behind them. We're really good at having the ambulance squad to pick people up once they've been run over and restore them. But it's really hard to go to that person who's kind of running everybody over and stopping them. Even as a pastor, that's difficult to do, but sometimes it's required. Again, Romans 12:18, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. It's going to take mutual agreement on the offense and the hurt in order to rebuild trust. So that's not always going to be possible. And one of the great things about having a larger church is even if that person who hurts you doesn't think they're in the wrong, you can keep your distance. And that sometimes that's the best that you can hope for. I would say the last thing when it comes to, we start by looking inside, but we end by looking to God. We can trust God with the outcome. In 1 Peter 2, Peter talks about Jesus, and he says, "Be like Jesus. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly." There is justice that comes from the great judge of all humankind, and that will come at the throne of mercy and grace, but of justice as well. So it doesn't depend on you to get even or to get justice. There are some injustices you have suffered that you're just going to have to let go and say, you know what? God's just going to have to take care of this one because I'm just not in a position and wouldn't be good for me to try to get justice in there. When we recently talked about the history of our church and leaving the United Methodist Church, and there was one person in particular who really betrayed my trust personally, and I was really bitter about that person. And it took me a year until I realized that my unforgiveness was drinking poison every day, and it wasn't hurting him, it was hurting me. And I made an act of will to stop being involved with, back then it was kind of online web pages of the latest scandal in United Methodism. It wasn't my club anymore. It took me a year to finally say, you know what, this is not helping me. By reading this stuff, I need to just not know what's going on anymore. And I need to not think about these people. I don't have to see them anymore. And it probably took another at least half year before I could think of this individual or even hear his name without kind of having my blood boil a little bit. Thankfully, I've gotten to the point where I can say his name, hear his name, doesn't do anything. In fact, there's nobody having to do with that whole Methodist thing that, makes my blood boil. There are very few people, thankfully, thank God, who, when I hear their name, I kind of, it evokes feelings of wanting to get justice. Most people who've done me wrong, I've been able to get to a point of maybe not wanting to see them, wanting to keep distance, not trusting them or what have you. But it's not my job to bring justice. That's God's job. Okay, I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope it's helpful to our church family as well, because we want a harmonious family. But we're all sinners, and because of that, we're going to get on each other's nerves. That's just how it's going to be. There's going to be a time when you come to church. I'm looking at Kevin across the desk. There's going to be a time when you come to church and you don't like the music. I've always counseled people, that day, as you're leaving church, say a prayer of thanks to God, because someone else who was at that service got the music that's their favorite. And you should be happy when it's someone else's birthday in your family. Only 2-year-olds are mad when their 4-year-old brother has a birthday and they don't get anything. So I'm not saying you're a 2-year-old, but there is a point, and it's before you get to be my age, I'm 68, where you should have grown up enough that when there's something that's not your favorite at church, unless somebody intended to stick a pin in you, and then we have to deal with hostile people, that we're just trying to please as many people on as many Sundays as much as we can. And so, you can get happy that it's somebody else's birthday today, not yours. And you can be glad that, it's one of your church family's birthday. All right. I think that's enough. Talk to you next week.